So Congressman, you just heard or you just saw the president's statement overnight from his call with President Xi on One China. Now the president says he supports the One China policy. I want to play you what he did say in December about it because it's very different. Listen.
I fully understand the One China policy, but I don't know why we have to be bound by a One China policy unless we make a deal with China, having to do with other things, including trade.
Unless we make a deal. Do you know of any deal that he made that caused this reversal?
Well, I would submit that if you give away the One China policy on the front end, that you can't glean anything from that negotiation. And I think that you all well know, and certainly I'm aware, that what we see as it relates to international relations is not always the totality of the agreement. So I think...
so are you saying you think the statement from the White House is misleading or leaving something out?
No, I think that Mr. Trump prudently recognizes the One China policy as the United States has since 1979.
So is it in the best interest
we don't
of
know
the American,
the entirety.
Do you think, because a lot of people that I talk to across Middle America, don't like the amount of power that they believe the United States gives China when it comes to trade and different economic deals as it comes to jobs. So, and that's part of what, as you know, played into the president taking the call from Taiwan, saying, why are we all of a sudden, why has it just been One China policy for 4 decades and that's okay? Do you think the One China policy is best for America?
Ultimately, there are a lot of things. It goes beyond trade and jobs, ultimately to the environment. We're shutting down coal power plants. The Chinese are opening them up.
No, but I guess,
but if he were
could you be on the record saying whether or not you think the One China policy is best for the American people?
I think it is in the world we live in today.
You
However, if you concede an acknowledgement of the One China policy when you're the president-elect, before you've spoken with Xi, you've lost the opportunity to perhaps extract concessions.
But he did.
He did it December 11th.
I mean, he conceded in his first phone call as president with him Thursday night. That's when he conceded.
Correct,
right
but he
away.
did not before he was sworn in, and he did not before he spoke to Xi.
There are people,
and so what we know is that we don't know the entirety of the discourse between President Xi and President Trump.
That is very fair. We don't know every word that was spoken in the conversation. One of the things that some observers are looking at and saying, though, it was because President Xi was silent, gave President Trump the silent treatment, basically, on this. And there are people who say, forced the president to essentially agree to the One China policy as terms for having any dialogue at all.
Well, it fascinates me that people would operate in a vacuum. I was in the military. I had a TSSCI clearance. I have, access to information that I can't share. I can assure you that the American public, for better or worse, is not privy to the totality of the conversation between President Xi and President Trump. Had he come in and said, status quo ante, and we're going to do it exactly like the previous administrations have since 1979, then the latitude to reach agreements with China on things like trade, on things like how they treat their workers, on things like their environmental policies and their carbon emissions is out the window. So I think, candidly, it was prudent, and I would believe, based on what I know of this administration, there was a reason that they sort of made that something that was in play to begin with.
All right, so you think something else, we're going to get something else out of this eventually?
I think we'll start to see over time a dynamic between the United States and China that's different than the previous 8 years.
Right. We'll watch because that's what a lot of the president's supporters wanted and were promised. Let's get your take on the travel ban, a stunning repudiation of the president's executive order, a unanimous 3-0 decision by the Ninth Circuit Court. Your take. Where should the administration go from here? They could take it to the Supreme Court, or should the president rewrite it, narrow and focus?
Look, ultimately, the easiest thing to do is to rewrite it. But if you look at the law, I believe it's subsection F of 1182 U.S. Code.
It is.
Right.
It essentially says the president may do what the president chooses to do.
It's just it was changed. In 1965, additional law was added that doesn't just make that.
And also, I can assume these 3 federal judges also knew the code and knew the law when they made their decision.
And so I think that the breadth of the ruling as it related to individuals who had a heretofore right to be in the United States, green card holders, et cetera, was what caused the hang-up.
So you think would you advise the president, if you're on the phone with him, and you say, Mr. Trump, don't take this to the Supreme Court, rewrite it, make it more narrow, and try to win?
Yeah, and here's why. It's not about winning. It's about doing what's right for the United States. So
you don't think his initial executive order was right for the United States?
Look, there is a legitimate interest, and I asked General Flynn this the other day when we spoke, when you took an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, do you find implicit in that oath thorough vetting of individuals who choose to come here? He said, I do. I think that's part of my oath. I do as well. Statistically, the threat is small, but based on data, the threat is real, and so due diligence is appropriate. We are now in a holding pattern, and if indeed the threat is real, getting out of the holding pattern and getting a policy in place makes sense.
Congressman Garrett, but again, just to be clear, you would advise the president to rewrite it at this point rather than fight it.
Look, ultimately, there's no sense in fighting for fighting's sake. It's about good policy for America.
But do you think he will?
Ultimately, we're all getting to know President Trump together.